Hey, if you took a little bit of time to play the game already, this is a good time to watch the video. If you have not played the game but you want to, you might want to do that now, or maybe wait on watching this video because I am going to give a couple of spoilers about the game and showing you how it was put together. So I come from a web programming background and I come from a love of stories, and choose your own adventure stories are really fascinating to me. So this was pretty cool to work with Twine for the first time. It's a free application. It's pretty forgiving if you are used to any sort of markup language, and it does handle some things that you can do within HTML. So for instance, I was really fascinated by this idea of having a background on my game that was sort of changing with the color. If you played the game, you know that it has to do with sort of like a rainy day, and I wanted to evoke those same feelings. And even though it's sort of sparse and monochromatic, it's still multimodal in terms of the way that it's created. I also did want to play with some sounds as well. So I didn't want people to be distracted with the sound over the text. I wanted the text to really lead the way, but I created this audio soundtrack using freesounds.org with rain. And then if you get further enough into the soundtrack, you can start to hear birds kind of chirping and singing in the background, which is referenced in the game. And all in all, just creating a mood and a space that would evoke a lot of the emotions that were meant to be shared within the game itself. Planning the game out, I think that the trickiest part was the storytelling and the organization of the game. So Twine itself, when you are using it, super simple interface. If you you can use their online editor, or you can actually pull down software to edit it on your computer. I do use the online version, and then I export my stories as files, so I have them saved. It's not just like referencing or using cookies, which is super helpful. And then I can come back in and sort of work on the games. And again, like, you have all of these options, and each of these pieces can be linked to other pieces. So this is the entire backend. These are all of the different gameplay options that you have, and they all sort of end in different ways, and a couple of the ways actually give you small rewards. They're like, digital rewards, but still rewards nonetheless. They're prizes for your persistence. So you are encouraged in the game, the language within the game encourages you, even if you get to one of these ends, you can go back, and you can go all the way back to the beginning and completely restart it. Sort of like the fun of an actual choose your own adventure book, where you could go back and do things. When you go into any of these individual tiles, you can see a lot of the text has a little bit of markup. I added these sort of like graphics to signify different types of things. So this is like the markup for like a musical note. So anytime Billie was singing to you, that would be a sort of an indicator of that. And then also when you had a choice, there was that little sort of flourish, and that I put that in there. But for the most part, you'll see like the actual tags to create, to link out to things. Super, super simple. You'll see I hosted on my server the actual music for the rain. So you can put a lot of complicated media files up there too. So this piece, as I said before, not hard. The harder part was telling the actual story. So what I ended up doing was going online and doing a bunch of research on choose your own adventure books and narrative around that. And I found a bunch of really cool templates for choose your own adventure. I think this actually would be quite interesting to use in the context of escape rooms as well. I think that this sort of like thinking about what are the different paths that people can take and what are outcomes that might happen would be an interesting way to frame an escape room. But in the game, you figure out pretty quickly that primarily you have 3 different actions that you can perform. You can talk to Billie, you can listen to Billie, and you can sing. One of the 3. And depending on the combination of talk, listen, and sing that you do, there are all sorts of different endings. So what I ended up doing was I used this template. I changed these little titles here because they gave me the choices all spelled out. But I changed the titles so that they corresponded to the different types of endings. And then I labeled those endings as, ABC, uppercase, 1, 2, 3, lowercase, and then ABC, or I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3 numerical, and then ABC lowercase. And that was sort of my signifier of, okay, this particular ending reveals this. So you had about, I don't know, maybe like 4 pathways that you could go down. I ended up drawing this out on paper too, which I'll probably try to find those sheets and then post them so you can see them too. But depending on what you chose, so you could click on talk, this is my choice, and then I choose to talk again, and then talk to talk, I chose to talk 3 times, the end. That was sort of like, this is that pathway. And I started to code the pathways. You can write all of the narrative into these choose your own adventure documents too. And they're great. They're really good for organizing. I ended up organizing all 3 options and then writing my narrative directly into Twine. But this was really key for helping me figure out, okay, how do the pathways sort of flow, and how can I make sure that all of the endings end up where I want them to be, and all of the links work. The other thing too that I think is really important to mention about games in general is that playing them through multiple times, super important, and key to success within creating the game. I'll leave you with one other story. So I decided to, again, I already said spoilers ahead, but I decided to write my game about mental illness. And it's something that I think about a whole lot, because I think that mental illness in this country is stigmatized. And all of us, it's sort of like, some people have mental illness and others don't. And I think all of us have some sort of shape or level or degree of mental illness that quite often goes untreated. And part of that, I think, is the stigma around it. So I decided to make a game about depression because I think it's something that we have to deal with over time. And it's just sort of the way that our human brains work. We take in all of this stimulus, we feel all of these feels, and at some point we have to reconcile for them. So for me, as somebody who struggles with depression, who talks about it a whole lot to people, to destigmatize it and to normalize the things that we have to do in order to combat it, I thought a game about that would be kind of interesting. So what would it be like to have 2 friends where a friend was just in a dark place and you had to lift them up, but knew that they really were the ones in control of their actions that might help them get out of that depression, whatever that is, that we're not heroes in and of ourselves in forcing people out of things like mental illness. So I made this game, and I didn't presuppose that it was going to be deep or profound or meaningful to the majority of people that would play it. But what I didn't anticipate was how it made me feel, because I felt like I'd put really big pieces of myself into the game that I did not know how I would react to putting those out into the universe. So just that notion of something might not be significant to the world, like maybe you had a stuffed toy that you grew up with that you love more than anything in the world, but to anybody else, like passing on the street, they wouldn't see it as a big deal. That was sort of the emotion that was kicked out by playing this game. So I actually had to call one of my friends, John Stewart, really late at night, right before the game jam was supposed to go live, before I put the game out. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can put the game out there. And he said, well, if you need to take a night and just, not put it up there, take it down, no big deal. Like, you do you, protect your heart, that kind of stuff. I don't think he said protect your heart. That's not really his language, but but he said definitely take care of yourself as part of it. So I tell you this story because, and I ended up posting the game, obviously, and I'm proud of my game. I don't I don't think that it probably means the same thing to everybody in the same way that every game probably doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. But I tell you this story because I think that as a creator of a game, or really as the creator of any sort of multimodal composition or any sort of design elements, you have to be ready for the emotions that might be kicked up or evoked by the work that you're doing, and what it means to give it to the world. And it's not always a bad thing if it takes you to a place of reflection and introspection. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that sometimes the effects are in the affective domain. They're not just necessarily in the cognitive domain of this makes me think this. Sometimes it's this makes me feel this. And I felt all sorts of things about the game that I created for my friend who suddenly had a seizure and then they found a brain tumor. Like, shocker. I don't know why I didn't think that that was going to happen, but it did. And I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. But I would add that as one more thing about being a creator of compositions, is that one of the products is the way that it makes you and other people feel about things. So I'm going to conclude by just saying that, I said before, I can't believe I made a game that was so sad, for me being a person that is a perennial cheerleader and trying to be optimistic all the time. So I ended up making a second game, and actually this game is still in the works. But this time decided to do it collaboratively with my team at the Office of Digital Learning. And I'm really excited to release this game at some point. But basically, the work that I showed you before in the Word doc of writing the story, we've been creating this second game within Twine. And not to spoil it too much, but the premise of it is that you have to keep my attention long enough to tell me an update. And there's all sorts of different distractions and things that happen in the game that can prevent you from getting this update out. So there's this multi-branching situation, and Brian Puente, who's our Adobe evangelist at our institution, he was sort of the inspiration for this game too. He had a heroic battle with cancer the year before Keegan had his situation with the tumor, and Brian is somebody that I'm just so lucky to have in my life. He's a champion and a survivor just like Keegan is. So Brian had tried to teach me how to play the game King's Quest, and we were using the Internet Archive, the game generator that's on there, and it did not go well. I was not feeling the game at all. It was real bad. So we decided to make a game about that, and keeping my interest without angering me, engage me or enrage me. So that's pretty much the premise of the game. But Chris Ziska Strange, she did a ton of the narrative for the game. She barely knew all of us within the office before she jumped in and started writing. She just loves games so much. And then Dan Whitaker helped with a lot of the programming in Twine and just pushing it in new directions, like could we build health meters, and could we bring in all sorts of crazy fonts and graphics and things that we hadn't done before. So I'll leave you with that. New game coming. I think that in terms of the elements within computational thinking that come into gameplay, all of them are readily there, but I think the one that is really crucial and key to me is just pattern recognition of saying, okay, if I can do this particular thing in this one environment, let me test it out and try it in this other environment and see what happens. And certainly creating a game either with yourself, as a choose your own adventure type of thing, and looking at the patterns of choices, and then also just in general with a bigger game, a collaborative game that you might be making with other people. All of it is interwoven in some really fantastic ways. So I know I've been talking a whole lot. Thank you for sticking it out if you've watched this whole thing without falling asleep or fast forwarding, or both. Falling asleep on your keyboard on the fast forward button, quite possible. But I just wanted to make sure that I documented this story of creating stories about people that I love within games within Twine. So thanks for your time.